Hi everyone and welcome for this Apitherapy video. This time we'll talk about nutrition again. In the last video I had quite a few questions regarding, especially on the French version of the video, quite a few questions saying it's a really nice point of view, thank you so much, but how could we just, follow follow that idea of nutrition that the bees are bringing us? And the answer is very simple. Of course, when we think about food from the beehive, everybody will think about honey. But if you think about honey and nutritional value, you'll find out that honey is mainly carbohydrates and water. Mainly. There are, of course, more than 100 useful elements in honey for our body, but in very tiny amounts for most of them, except water and carbohydrates. So that being said, honey is not the universal answer that we would be expecting from such a great nutritious point of view that the bees are bringing in. And if you haven't seen that other video, please go see it. I'll put the link. It's excellent how bees see nutrition, how they do it. It's just wonderful. They're very, very advanced for me, way more than just us like vegetarians or vegans or whatever else, paleo or whatever type of diet we use. For me, bees are really a model concerning nutrition. So since honey is not the answer, what could it be? It is, of course, for the ones that know already, pollen. The pollen that their bees harvest is so rich and nutritiously it's amazing. It has, let's say, about, between 40 to 50 something percent of carbohydrates. So there's still quite a few carbohydrates, but we need them. We need those carbohydrates. It's important. There's also in pollen between 15 and 25, sometimes 30% of protein, usually about 20, a little bit more percent of protein. There's also lots of vitamins, lots of minerals, lots of lactic ferments, good bacteria, probiotic, really good for our intestinal flora. There's also some lipids in the pollen, some very good lipids. So it's just an amazing source of food that is extremely complete. Almost nothing is lacking from pollen. So that is actually, on the nutritional point of view, a real answer to how could we follow that path of nutrition that the bees are teaching us. Well, if we harvest some fresh pollen, we don't dehydrate it, we freeze it because it has all those qualities I mentioned, because when it is not dehydrated. If you dehydrate it, you lose lots of vitamins, you lose lots of lactic ferments, lots of really good stuff that is in the pollen. So you should not use the dehydrated pollen. You need the fresh frozen pollen. If you cannot find any, contact me, ask the question. I will give you a way to find it. It's very easy. So that's what you need, the fresh frozen bee pollen. So now, the question is, for sure pollen, but really, can I really change my diet including pollen into it? Well, actually, yes. But if you want to go that path, there's a few things you will have to get accustomed to. You will have to get, used to. Here they are. First thing would be the taste. Now, pollen has a really strong taste. We're used to some people very sweet stuff that doesn't taste much more than sweet, or things that have just a mellow taste, not too strong. And pollen has a really strong taste, flavor to it. It's very strong, very potent. So we have to get used to it if we want to eat pollen regularly. Of course, the fresh frozen bee pollen will be much better taste-wise than the dehydrated one. That will be more bitter and drier, sometimes even hard to crunch, sometimes, depending how strongly dehydrated it is. But when it's fresh frozen, it melts in your mouth just like butter, and it tastes really more sweet, very nice. So it's just better taste-wise. So that's one thing you will want to get used to, the taste. And now there's also the allergies. People having hay fever, seasonal allergies. Some people will have allergy to pollen. So if you do have allergy to pollen, please be very careful. If you try eating pollen, first use one little grain, tiny little grain. You could, just put it on your tongue or between your lip and your gums and leave it there, and don't swallow it yet. Just leave it there for a minute, then check if it's all red and it starts swelling. If it starts swelling, then don't eat it. Go very slowly, go see your allergologist and make sure you're okay with the pollen. That being said, you could actually desensitize yourself from allergies. That works sometimes, not all the time. You have to be careful with this, but you could eat one grain of pollen every single day and slowly desensitize yourself to some allergies. And that doesn't work for everybody. Please check with your allergologist before doing this. It's a technique that sometimes works. I've seen it working with some people. Now, I'm not a medical doctor. Don't take my word for it. But please check with your allergologist and see what you can do. Some are advised to take some local honey. Well, in local honey, why would that be good? Because it contains some of the pollen. So if you eat the pollen directly, it's even better. And another thing, the pollen you'll be eating will not necessarily be the one you're allergic to, but still you're working with pollen, and sometimes it works to create some good desensitization. I've seen it happen quite a few times. So that's one thing. And another one will be eating pollen, because on the microscopic level, the particles of pollen, those tiny little grains of pollen, but really microscopic, really small, they have some kind of abrasive shell. That abrasive shell, if you eat it, might sometimes irritate your digestive system. I would say between 10 and 15% of people will feel that discomfort from eating pollen at first. Now, that being said, for most people, that discomfort will decrease with time as you keep consuming some pollen. And for myself personally, I had this discomfort when I just started eating pollen. I was taking pollen like 1 teaspoon a day, 2 days per week. And every time I was feeling this discomfort, I was like, not very pleasant. I'm not sure I will keep going with that pollen. But since I like the bees so much, I just decided to keep going. So I kept eating some pollen. After 2-3 months, that sensation, that discomfort just went away. Now I don't feel that anymore, not at all. So that's another thing you have to get accustomed to. Another thing is with food. When you change your diet, your digestive system might not be used to use actually all those good elements from what you're eating. Sometimes the intestinal flora is not perfectly balanced yet and ready to digest what you are eating when you make a change in your diet. So you need to, slowly get used to it. Some people, for example, I heard that are saying, oh, if I work really a lot, I need to eat meat. And they really think that. And on paper, pollen has even sometimes more protein than meat. And usually they're thinking about protein. So on the paper, we know. And it's a complete protein. It has all the essential amino acids our body need to function. So it's not, the theory is not there. It doesn't fit. Why pollen wouldn't give them as much energy? And then they eat the pollen and they say right away, oh, I don't receive enough energy. I'm not as strong as when I eat meat. But they actually literally did eat as much protein as they do with the meat. So you see, they have to get used to it. And there's part of that change that is connected with just emotionally. Eating something we used to eat just makes us peaceful. It releases some stress. It just calms us down. And very often it's that part that is missing when we make a change in our diet. So we need some time to just get used to all this. Well, that's very, very important at that point. And now another question will be, what about quantities? How much should I eat? Well, weight-wise, pollen will contain about 20-25% of protein. That being said, you know a little bit, how to compare it weight-wise. Personally, myself, for my breakfast, I will eat about 80 grams, 80 to 100 grams of pollen in the morning. And that is my breakfast. That's all. That's what I do since a few months now. And I really love it. It's wonderful. And the taste at first, it's not my favorite. When I was seeing my wife eating some eggs and toast in the morning and I had my pollen, the first time I was like, oh, I would really prefer those eggs and toast and butter and whatever else, But with time, I developed a taste for it. And now it's the opposite. Now it's her that is now eating pollen along with me. But that takes some time to get used to it, to be craving for something you don't know yet that doesn't exist. The craving will come once you really know what you're eating. You did eat it a few times usually, and now the craving can arrive and appear. So you see, that takes some time as well. So for me, that's where I am right now. I also sometimes replace my dinner with pollen when I feel a little bit heavy. I do this because pollen gives you just a wonderful sensation in your body. If you feel a bit heavy, it's also good for losing weight, but not like muscle weight, but losing extra weight that you don't want to keep. It helps for this as well most of the time in many cases. So for me, if I feel a bit heavy myself, I might sometimes also switch my dinner for pollen, because since it contains pretty much everything you need in your diet, there's no problem. You can switch anything with it. It's just a matter of eating enough of it. And it needs also to be fresh frozen bee pollen. Don't take the dehydrated one, please. And also make sure your source of pollen is a good one, not full of pesticides. That's a really important point. If you're not sure of your source of pollen, contact me. I will let you know what would be a good source for you, wherever you are. So So it gives you a few good ideas of how slowly we can move our nutrition, how we eat, to something more connected with the bees and how they do it and how greatly they do it. So that gives you a good idea of that. Now, the question usually is it okay to take from the bees, to take their pollen? Because if you know a bit about beekeeping, the bees harvest the pollen to feed their babies, the larvae bees. So they need it. They really need pollen. If we take all the pollen, they won't be very healthy anymore. They'll have lots of problems. So, and how does that work? How can we decide if we can harvest pollen? Is it okay to eat pollen or not? Are we depleting the bees? Is that why the bees are doing so bad? Not at all. So now the answer to this is, if you are a real beekeeper and you're really keeping bees and you're keeping them healthy, you want to make sure that there's no lack in their diet. They eat well, they're healthy and everything. So you can harvest pollen only when there's abundance of food for them. When there's abundance of food, there'll be tons of pollen. Really, they'll stack the hive full of it, and it's amazing how much they can harvest. So you can harvest your pollen only if there's an abundance of pollen. So the role of a beekeeper is to provide abundance of food for the bees, but not an abundance of food where there's tons of pesticides around. That's a big topic. I'll talk about it one day, how we can create permaculture design for your bees, specifically high yield producing nectar and pollen and propolis for your bees. That's something just amazing to do. We'll talk about it more in another video. But for the moment, for the time being, just be conscious that if the bees have enough abundance, there's tons of pollen and they are really happy to share it with us. And how do I know that they want to share with us? I will share with you an amazing thing that happened to me as a beekeeper with my bees. I had for a while, not for very long, but I had a varicose vein that happened to me, and I had this dull pain all the time, just for about a week, and then someday we had an amazing tour with the kids at the organic farm I was taking care of, and the bees I had there were just very nice, and I took some because I had a tour. The kids were coming to visit from a school, and I just showed them the bees in a demonstration beehive, just a glass beehive, so the children could see and look at the bees. And I was doing this all day, and then at the end of the day, kids go back to school. I bring those bees back in the original beehive, and I'm just transferring them in there. I'm in shorts, it's a sunny day, bees are not stinging at all, it's very peaceful there. And so while I'm there, I just open a few other hives. There's bees all over flying. They could sting me anytime. I'm not protected again, but they're very peaceful. So I close everything after about 45 minutes, and then I walk away. When I'm about 10 meters away from the beehives, 5 of those bees finally decide to sting me. But they actually sting me just around and on that varicose vein lump I had. And this is just amazing to me because those bees actually died, you know. They really died because their stingers is stuck there. Now it detaches from their body and it kills them basically. It takes a little while, but they eventually died. And so they did that. Of course, if you know a bit about bee venom, the next morning, I had no more pain. The lump was reduced so much. There's just a little bit still showing, but nothing as serious as it was. No more pain. I was feeling much better with this. It was getting me worried because, I was a young man. Usually, young men don't have too many varicose veins. And I know that it's in my family, there's some of that kind of diseases are there. Anyway, so it did get me worried. But after that, I knew it was all over with. So 5 of those bees actually kind of sacrificed themselves to help me out. And that is just, for me, it was life-changing. I mean, it changed my whole understanding of how the bees are interacting with us, beekeepers, and because I always had that in the back of my mind. Can we really trade with them? Are they happy to give us part of what they harvest? I knew it was all right because you still feel it as a beekeeper, but that time I knew. For me, it was kind of a signature from them. Yes, we're happy to work with you. And I was really amazed by this. So this is just to show you how bees are really, and they're inclined to share with us. And there's a real relationship between bees and humans. And this is amazing. And it's honeybees mainly that can provide us with all those different products, like the pollen, the propolis. Also, we'll talk more about that in other videos, of course. That time is really about nutrition, and it's the pollen from the beehive that gives us this really high nutritional value. So that's about it for today. Thank you for listening. I hope it's still very inspiring. There will be many more videos to come. Hope you like it. Please share, subscribe if you really appreciate my work, and talk to you later on for another Apitherapy video.